I actually worked for another hospice organization, and they were kind of lukewarm in hospice. Meaning kind of half in, half out. That's when my husband began to encourage me, maybe you just need to start your own. I invested $6,000 in that hospice, and we grew it to $3 million in annual revenue. I have a work from anywhere business. I say that it fits in my backpack. And so this is really helping nurse entrepreneurs and healthcare organizations establish themselves as CE providers.
What is up, guys? Jason here. Welcome back to the channel and our series, Nurses to Riches, The Road to Fire. Today's guest is a nurse with an ADN, or in other words, a nurse with an associate's degree, who turned a $6,000 investment into a $3 million hospice business. After working in home health and hospice care, she decided to build her own hospice agency without having a clue how to even get started. And now she also mentors nurses on how to market themselves and grow their businesses. She found a really unique way to bring new clients into her business and generate more revenue than she could have ever imagined. And we're going to dissect exactly how she did all of this with only an associate degree in nursing. So tell us what your name is and a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me. What I do, I'm a nursing continuing education consultant. I'm also a business and marketing mentor for nurse entrepreneurs. And really what I do is I help nurses turn what they already know into income. That's my whole focus.
Okay. And what do you mean by that? What they already know, turning it into income? Because I get a lot of nurses asking me how they can monetize themselves because they feel like they don't know how to monetize themselves. Even though when you dig really deep, you actually realize there's something that's marketable about them that they don't realize. So
Oh
what do
my
you mean?
God. Yeah, I love that question because, and I think you're so right. Nurses everywhere are asking the question, how can I get away from the bedside? How can I do something different with my nursing degree? Do I need to go back to school to be able to start a business? And the answer is absolutely not, unless you're seeking to continue to work in nursing at a level that requires a higher level of education. If you want to prescribe, then you need to be a nurse practitioner, right? Working with a physician. But if you just want to start a business, then stop where you are and figure out what you want to do. So think about things. It can be as simple as thinking about the kind of advice people often ask you for. There may be a business right inside that. For instance, the question I got was, how can I add nursing continuing education credit to my courses? Well, this is something that I figured out years ago when my husband and I owned our own hospice agency. And I knew that to increase length of stay in hospice, I needed to be able to educate the medical community and specifically nurses who made the referrals, right? So we became a CE provider. Years down the road, when I'm looking at starting a digital online business, it suddenly, came to me that the gold from that experience in the hospice was that I had figured out the whole nursing CE process and I knew how to do it, and it was something I could help other people do. And so now I spend a lot of time doing that. So typically, the business that we have in nursing is just something we figured out by ourselves. So, and today, Jason, thinking about like the nursing shortage and how orientation programs and things like that are suffering in hospitals. If a nurse has been a preceptor or has worked in oncology or any particular unit for some period of time, they could create a course for other nurses who want to be successful in that field. There's so many things to do.
So tell me a little bit about your background because I want to know how you came to become a nurse.
Oh, I love that. And the reason I chuckle is because I'm not one of those people who said, when I was 7 years old, gosh, I'm just going to be a nurse. It's what I've always wanted to do. That wasn't me. I was originally a music major and a vocal major. So I'm a ham. I love to sing. Interviewing is great for me. Love all this stuff. But when I became a nurse, it was life shifted gears, studying music, fell in love, started a family, had my first child, and the practicality of life kind of dictated that I do something that would provide some stability for my family. And I happened to live 30 minutes from one of the best nursing schools in Texas. And the rest is kind of history. But what happened for me during that time, and I'm an associate degree RN, I always tell people I've never advanced my education from there, but even with an associate degree, I've been able to do things just kind of beyond my wildest dreams in and out of the profession of nursing. But I think what I was getting to is that it was serendipitous for me that I fell in love with the career. And I have a great passion for nursing as well as the nurses who work within it. So, really, just now, it's just been a great fit.
Can you tell me when did you graduate?
Huh. You're going to date me on this one. 1991, 33 years ago.
Awesome. Wow. So you got your associate's degree, and then where did you start working as your first job?
I originally began working postpartum and OB-GYN. So I worked with moms and babies, and I also worked with the surgeries, the gynecological surgeries, and things like that. That was my first couple of years.
And then after that, where did you go, and why did you leave?
Okay. I left that position I was living in Victoria, Texas, which is kind of between Houston and Corpus Christi on the coast. And I wanted to relocate. My husband and I wanted to relocate to South Padre Island. So I got a job in Brownsville at one of the hospitals there. And that was the reason for the move. From there, though, I ended up moving into home care and found that that was really my first love in nursing, is helping patients and families navigate healthcare from point A to point B while in their home setting. And so that's always been my first love in nursing ever since. And it was then that my career kind of grew into nursing leadership. And again, even as an ADN, just being able to work in leadership really for the bulk of my nursing career has been a wonderful blessing to me.
I really love that story because I get a lot of nurses who ask me if they can make it without a bachelor's, and I tell them it's absolutely possible. Even now, I work at a hospital where plenty of our nurses have their associate's degrees, and most hospitals don't even give that big of a experience or a degree differential. So
Oh,
even
my.
if you do have your bachelor's degree, you may get make like maybe an additional $1,500 a year,
Yeah,
maybe $2,000 a
maybe.
year, right? And in addition to that, it's not as expensive if you go the ADN route. Like if you get an associate's degree, it's less expensive and you can
Mhm.
start working much sooner than if you were to go for your bachelor's. And then once you're in the hospital setting, if you want to get your bachelor's degree, then you can have your employer help you pay for that depending on who you work for. So
Exactly.
yeah. And okay, so then you moved out here, right? And you started working in the home healthcare setting because you
Mhm.
said you loved helping families and patients navigate that
Mhm.
the care that they needed while they were in the home setting. So,
Yes.
what kind of role did you have in that position? Like what are your responsibilities in that type of setting?
In leadership, it was, everything from making the schedule and making the plans of care, reviewing the plans of care, making sure that we had the appropriate team members available and scheduled to see those patients. And many times, we know how it is in nursing leadership, right? Many times just putting my scrubs on and going out and hitting the road. I definitely wasn't without that and did my share of weekend coverage and on call and all of those things as well. But yeah, just from an administrative standpoint, being able to understand the budget, plan the care and services, hopefully within our budget and with what we were going to be reimbursed for and those kinds of things. So, a lot of things that I learned on the fly. And there's a lot of that in nursing leadership that, typically a nurse will get promoted and bumped into leadership without any training orientation at all, right? Suddenly you're just the one who's been there the longest and it's your turn, you get to step up, right? But nobody provides that kind of support to you. So there's a lot that, I had to figure out on the fly. And sadly, that still happens today, but just a wealth of knowledge. And I think one thing about my career that's been very satisfying for me is that every role, every position, every challenge, every success has been something I've been able to use for the future, for the next step forward. And, I think that's one of the neat things that has happened.
Now, I want to ask something because you did mention that many employers will just throw you in there and expect you to like learn this new role, and
Mhm.
you went into a leadership position, right? So, did you have any prior experience in leadership before this?
Not formally, no.
Mm.
No.
And informally, then, what kind of experience did you have?
I think just being someone who is very industrious I have always just been able to see what needs to be done and do it. So, kind of the leader within, I guess, is what I had, and so was able to step up. I mean, again, not without its challenges. The big challenges for me were things like because I was very young, and I mean, well, look at where I am now. But I mean, I was in my early 30s, late 20s, and managing nurses who were 20 years my senior, right? So how do you communicate well in those situations? How do you get beyond some of those barriers, things like that? How do you guide and direct people who have more experience than you do? Those kinds of things, those are big challenges that come up for a new leader. So I had to learn a lot of the soft skills and really hone those soft skills and communication skills.
I see. And do you remember what year you took on this leadership role?
I want to say 1995,
Oh,
1995, 96.
okay. And this was in home care, right? Like home health care.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And how long did you do that for?
Oh my gosh. On and off about the next 15 years. And when I say on and off, it really wasn't on and off. I guess there were multiple or a few different employers during that period because I experienced a divorce, ended up moving back home, just different things that happened. So, yeah, but that was the crux of my career for a good solid 15 years.
Wow, 15 years. Did you have children at this time?
I did. I
Ah.
did. Yeah.
And how was it being in leadership and raising a family?
It had some challenges for sure, but it wasn't. I don't know. I think the beauty of home care is what made it easier because typically everything's expected to be done at least during daytime hours. So that was very helpful. The on call had to be negotiated a little bit, so I did need to negotiate some childcare and things like that. But for the most part, home care was a pretty good fit for me, and especially when I went from being married to being a single mom, it was really a pretty good fit for me. Again, everything has its challenges, but it was a lot simpler than having to navigate a hospital schedule or something like that.
I see. And okay, so do you remember what age your children were from like the time you took on that position to the time you ended up leaving?
Sure. Gosh, when I got started in the home care space, my oldest son would have been 3, and my youngest daughter was just born.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
so they
rough.
kind of, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so they kind of grew up with me working in that space. Yeah.
Mm. I know what it's like. Our son is 3.5 now, and man, like we're trying to build a business, and at this moment, like I have a couple of employees that I've hired to help us build something, and it's taken a lot, because you want to be able to balance your workload with your
Mhm.
life. And when you have children that are that young, it's very difficult because you want to
Mhm.
be present for them, right? And but you
Exactly.
know that the work that you're doing is important and meaningful, and it's going to result in something that they can then benefit from when they're older. Right?
Mhm.
So how is your relationship with your children these days?
Oh my gosh, it's wonderful. And I think, you know, I have always been that kind of mom who I marveled at my children from the day they were born, and I continue to marvel at them today as they are adults. I mean, all of my youngest daughter, my goodness, is 31 years old, and it's just I still love watching them as much as I enjoyed when they were little. But it's wonderful to see what they're doing in their own lives. My daughter, our youngest daughter, actually is a nurse. She became an
Oh,
LPN, and she's raised all of her children at home. The youngest of hers is now in kinder, and she's got a work at home remote case management job. I thought, how cool is that?
ooh, isn't that nice? So, how many children? You said you have two or three?
Well, I had two. I remarried in 2000. My husband and I were when the movie You've Got Mail came out. We were doing our own thing with that. So we're one of the very first successful online marriages. I think we've been married 24 years, and but he had 3 older children, and I had 2 younger ones. So together we have 5.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
been a crazy ride.
All right. So let's talk a little bit more about this home healthcare experience that you had in leadership. Now, I have worked with a lot of nurses who have worked in home healthcare previously. And I want to know what is like the biggest issue you had or the employees had that they always brought up to you that you felt like that's the main issue you needed to address in your position all of the time?
I think, one of the things that always comes up because you are working in the patient's home, right, is how do we communicate and present ourselves in a way that's respectful to the patient and the family all the time, because they do get to have it their way in their home, right? Just like if we walked into a patient's room in the hospital, we would want to kind of cater to what their needs are. So I think typically the things were if we had a personality mismatch, when the soft skills just weren't working. And bottom line, nurses don't get training in the soft skills, and they need them. So this has historically been an area that I needed to work on. And I think in the home care space and hospice, especially when we're in the home, that's just vitally important. So that was one of the biggest things that I had, was just kind of managing the difficult patient and family, right? That seemed to always follow me around in nursing.
Yeah. Did you guys ever run into a situation where you felt like, wow, I'm going to lose my job over this? Because
Mm,
I know there's some cases that I've seen, not necessarily in leadership, but, at the bedside, where nurses
mhm,
may have committed an error, or they made a mistake in
mhm,
dealing with a certain situation, and they thought
mhm,
that could have ended up in them losing their jobs.
mhm.
Was there ever a situation where you felt like, I don't know what to do with this situation, and I need to figure out how I'm going to resolve this and not get fired?
Mhm,
Because
mhm.
I see it every now and then with nurses. I just want to know if it ever happens on the leadership side.
On the leadership side, typically it's happened and you're going, okay, so now what? So yes, there are some things that happen like that. And even I can go as far as to say, when we owned our own hospice,
Mhm.
we actually there were two things that came up with, and so it's a little bit out of the home care space, but not really.
Yeah.
We had two different suicide situations, right? So one was the patient had terminal cancer. Her husband, though, through caring for her, was suicidal.
Mm.
He was at his wit's end. He couldn't do anymore. They happened to live right on the river. Their home literally backed up to the river, and he had made some very telling statements, right? So here I am reaching out to I reached out to national organizations, state organizations. Anyway, what does a hospice leader do in this situation?
Yeah.
And nobody had any guidelines. It was all about if the patient is suicidal. Well,
Mm.
that's really interesting because this is a gaping hole that we have right here. So ultimately, I worked with one of our state organizations, and we put together a plan within our own hospice that we were able to remedy that situation. But that was definitely something we had to get out in front of
Mm.
because, yeah, I mean, things just happen. We
Wow.
also had another situation with a hospice situation where the family lived in a lower socioeconomic neighborhood, and it was a very, very large family, 20, 25 family members present at any time. We're taking care of a dying patient. There's a lot of ineffective coping going on in the space,
Mm.
just dangerous for a nurse to go into. So we had to navigate some of those challenges, whether it's, working with the family or having, police escort, whatever we needed to do to keep our staff safe. And we had to take some different measures. So, but just things that come up that you
Yeah.
could never imagine. Kind of like when I started my nursing career all those years ago, I never dreamed workplace violence in a hospital where a nurse can be assaulted by a patient or family in a patient room. Wow, that's just beyond me. The changes that have happened in nursing over the last 30 years have been profound.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love those stories. So I have one story from a friend who owns a residential assisted living facility,
Okay.
something similar to. It's basically like a nursing home type thing, but in a residential home, right?
Like a group
And
home kind of place.
exactly, exactly. So there was this one particular resident who was there, a patient who has dementia, Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
and they have caregivers who are living in that, well, not living, but they're working in that residential home, and they're
Mhm.
supposed to care for these residents.
Yep.
Well, one of them forgot to put an air tag on this specific resident, and he has dementia, Alzheimer's. He just happened to roam outside of the house, and they spent like the entire day looking for this gentleman. They could not find him anywhere. So the friend that we have who owns this home, she had to go there and then spent the entire day with the police and the employee that lost this resident looking
Hmm.
for this gentleman. Then she had to call the family members to let them
Yep.
know that they lost him.
Hmm.
And that day, she thought she was going to get her business shut down.
Oh, yeah.
Mind you, she makes about $600,000 a year from this business.
Woo.
So
Hmm.
this is basically where she generated all of her income from.
Yeah.
And thankfully, they found him. He was not too far from where he was, where the home is located in. And
Hmm.
when they found him, obviously, you got to go through training again with the employees to let them know this is very important. We cannot be losing our residents. You need
Right.
to put the air tags on them, and you need to keep an eye on them, right? But
Yeah.
it's about managing the employees. I think that's one of the hardest things when you're in the leadership position, right?
Hmm.
Would you agree that managing employees is probably one of the hardest things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the burden of leadership, nursing leadership in specific, when you read the Nurse Practice Act, it's pretty much right. I mean, it's clearly written that you're responsible for everything that happens
Yeah.
when you're in a nursing leadership role.
Mm.
Anybody that is in your charge, you are responsible for their actions. And boy, that in itself is very scary. That itself is very scary. You have to really know your people, and trust that they're going to do the right thing. Will things happen? Occasionally, yes, but my goodness, yeah, my heart goes out to whoever experienced that,
Yeah.
because we just can't predict, sometimes the things that are going to happen. But to get out in front of it as much as you can and just work with the authorities and work with the family, bring them in as soon as possible is what I would have done and said, hey, this happened. I'm going to jump right out in front of it and, own it, because that's all you can do. Own it and fix it.
Absolutely. So, okay, in what year did you say you finished working in this leadership role with home healthcare?
Oh, goodness. I suppose that was probably all the way up to about 2000 or so, right around 2000.
And why did you leave?
Oh, goodness. Just life changes, and I think too, I've had a career in nursing it's many and varied. And so when opportunities came up that would allow me to step up and advance my career, I was never hesitant to take those. So if, with that being said, if there was perhaps more money or a better work environment or whatever it might have been, I was always willing to take on those challenges. But at the same time, sometimes I needed to make a choice depending on what was going on with my family. I had a big concern, I'll share, that maybe my resume made me look like a job hopper, because there's that, right? And then my husband said, and I've heard so many other people say lately, Teresa, no, really, it just means you have a well-rounded experience. So I think anymore, the trend has changed. And I think that we all know that there's so much available within nursing that you can move around. And that's a great blessing for sure.
Yeah. So, what role did you take on after you left your leadership position in the home healthcare setting?
Mhm. After I left my leadership in home care, that's when I moved into hospice. And I actually worked for another hospice organization, and they were kind of lukewarm in hospice. I mean, kind of half in, half out. They were a county organization, and so they seemed to enjoy the billing. I'll say that. They seemed to enjoy the billing for the hospices. But we had a PRN chaplain, we had a PRN social worker, and just I thought, gosh, there's so much more we could do for these families. And so that's when my husband began to encourage me, maybe you just need to start your own.
Wow. And how did that happen? Like, what steps did you take to start your own hospice care business? And you said that your husband encouraged you, but is that really what you wanted to do?
I was petrified, when he would say, this is what you need to do. And I would say, you don't even know what that would look like. I don't even know what that looks like. But after we'd had the conversation several times, I did go ahead and start kicking the tires. And back in that day, this was like 2002, 2003. So it's been a while. But I just went to the CMS website and found the hospice provider application. And that, I downloaded it, printed it, started looking at it. And it was a step by step process. And one of the very first things in it, though, said that if you're going to apply as a new hospice agency, then anybody who's applying for home health or hospice needs to have a letter from their bank or financial institution saying that they have at least $250,000 liquid to support this thing. And here I am starting a business, and I said, if that's true, then I'm out because that's not me right now. Very transparent. But there was actually a number I could call, a phone number. I couldn't believe that. And when I called, somebody answered because I decided I'm gonna chase this thing down. I can either do it or I can't. But I called and I asked a question: Is this a valid requirement? And she said, I'm so glad you called because just last week, it was lifted for hospices. It still applies to home care agencies, but it is no longer relevant for hospice applications.
Wow.
And that's how the thing went. From one thing to another, I just continued making phone calls, asking questions as needed, and got through the process. And within 6 months, from start to finish, we had opened our doors and had our first couple patients, and the rest, as they say, is history.
6 months?
6 months. I was on it.
Wow. I have a friend who's starting he had to retrofit a house that he purchased so he can start his own residential assisted living facility. And it's taken
Mhm.
him 2.5 years just to get to this point where he's actually finally opening up the doors and getting clients. It took
Wow.
that long. And you took
Wow.
6 months. Oh my gosh. Okay, so tell me aside from applying for it, what kind of requirements were needed to actually start opening up the doors and accept patients into this facility?
Sure, sure. I needed to have, contracts with hospitals who would take patients for acute symptom management, that benefit for hospice. I also needed to have contracts with local area nursing homes in the counties that I wanted to serve in the event we needed respite care or anything like that. So I just started putting things together, and of course, I had been working in hospice already. So I had developed a lot of relationships in these places. And so once I left, I just came around and said, hey, I'm going to start my own, and I'm interested in, contracting with you. Can we work together? And so the doors opened pretty easily. So I got that done. I had to put together a policy and procedure manual according to the Medicare regulations, all of those kind of things. And for anything like this, you can usually buy an off the rack, even today, an off the rack policy manual. So I grabbed one and I just personalized it or customized it for what I needed. But those kind of things. And my husband was a professional photographer. And so he had an office space already downtown. So I just took out a little part of it that would function as our hospice. And that's kind of it. We just got started.
Yeah, I interviewed this gentleman. His name is Carl Pierre. So he has this YouTube channel where he purchases real estate in Italy, Brazil, and all these other places. But I also found out that his mother owned an agency, like a home health agency, where she gets agency nurses, LPNs, RNs, and CNAs to facilities that are in need, and
Mm-hmm.
he helps her manage it. So he told me that in 1990, somewhere around that year, she herself used to work in a home health agency as, I believe, a manager or something of the sort. And
Mm-hmm.
she saw exactly how much this agency was billing the hospitals. And she said to
Mm-hmm.
herself, this is ridiculous. Like, they're charging so much for these services. I could just open up my own agency. So that's
Yep.
exactly what she did. And over the years, her son came along and started helping her with the marketing and all these other things. And he's the one that I interviewed on our YouTube channel. But he told me that this year, their revenue is going to be around $20 million
Wow.
because they switched their model from home health agency to now, I believe, home health care. So
Mm-hmm.
not only do they just have agency nurses and CNAs that they're sending to hospitals and home healthcare, facilities, but they
Yeah.
also are now in the business of owning and acquiring home healthcare, businesses.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and they
Fantastic.
have so many investors that their projected revenue in the next 5 years on a yearly basis is going to be close to, if not $100 million per year in revenue.
Wow.
So the
Incredible.
potential, yeah, yeah. And they're spread all across like New York State, somewhere up there, but mostly on the East Coast of the United States. So,
Mm-hmm.
but when you talk about all of these requirements, I just cannot believe Because a lot of people say, I don't know, it's too much work. I can't do this. I can't do that. But you, without knowledge, you were able to go from step zero to opening up the doors
Yeah.
in a hospice care, business within 6 months.
Well,
And
thank you.
we're going to talk about the revenue portion of it because people are going to be amazed. But
Hmm.
I want to commend you for that because you're a nurse who got your associate's degree.
Hmm.
When nurses say, is my associate's degree enough?
Yeah.
And then you went into leadership and then you opened up your own business and you did all of this by yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Thank
My
you.
gosh.
Thank you for that. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Okay. So let's talk about when the doors opened, how
Mhm.
did you acquire your patients?
Oh, great question. And so I had a wonderful medical director. That was also a step to prepare, right? And I chose carefully, and I chose. We're in very rural Northeast Kansas, but I chose a physician who's very he'd been around for a while. He's very well respected. Anyway, he actually sent us our first hospice patient, actually the first two, and once we were ready to go. He sent the first patient, we got started with that one, and then we got started with the next one. And but from there, I have to tell you that the very first day that we opened, okay, let's just talk about that because I'm excited. I got this agency, we're open today, nothing happens. Right? Nobody cares. Nobody cares but the business owner. Nobody cares. Nobody knows. And so I sat in this eerily quiet office that day in the morning, and I thought, well, this will never do. So that afternoon, me and my bubble jet printer, right, I printed up a bunch of brochures, trifold. They were very nice. I mean, they were as nice as they could look from a bubble jet printer. But I made a bunch of marketing packets, and the next day I hit the road with I guess, my office line forwarded to my cell phone in my pocket. And I hit the road and I did some marketing, just went out to every assisted living, nursing home, hospital in a certain area. And every day thereafter, I would target a different area or a different county and just continue to start, you know, I guess shaking the trees or raising awareness, letting people know that we were out there. And that's how we grew. And yes, our medical director gave us the first patient, but then from there, I knew that if we were going to impact length of stay, because length of stay when we opened was about 3 days, median length of stay, terrible, terrible. And so that's why we became a CE provider, was so that I could get in front of nurses and teach them about what do our patients look like? Who are they? When should you talk to them? Because they're all going to say no the first time you start talking about it. So how do they have those conversations? We taught them everything they needed to know. And that strategy right there, giving away nursing continuing education, got me behind the door of every gatekeeper in the physician's offices. I was a welcome presence everywhere I went. And that was worth 3 qualified referrals every single week. Every single week. And that, yeah, we grew leaps and bounds.
Oh man. Okay, we'll talk about that, but let's talk about you printed all these brochures. You started driving from neighborhood to neighborhood. You went to hospitals. You went to nursing facilities. All these facilities because you wanted to get your name out there. You wanted them to
Yep.
know that you had a hospice agency and you could accept patients that needed hospice from their facilities. And you
Yep.
said that initially the patients that you received had a very short length of stay.
Oh,
Is that
yeah.
right? Like 3 to
Yeah.
4 days.
3 days was the median length of stay back here in the day. Yeah.
Wow. And so once you started doing these continuing education classes, first, how did you even come up with that? What made you think, okay, I'm going to create this course
Yeah.
in this program to teach nurses how to do this. And then maybe I can network with these nurses and these healthcare providers and now get more patients into my hospice agency. What made you think
Mhm.
about that?
I think because, first of all, it was our goal to impact length of stay and increase access to care. Length of stay never should have been 3 days, right, for a 6 month program. And a lot of people said, well, why did you target nurses? Why didn't you target physicians? Well, physicians don't call me with a referral. It's nurses that call. It's nurses who spend the bulk of the time with the patient in the hospital, in the clinic, wherever. And so that's when I knew I need to educate nurses. I also knew the struggle of getting beyond the gatekeeper. You can't just go in with a bag of candy and say, hey, I'm with XYZ Hospice and expect to get patients. That doesn't work. It never has worked. And so instead, I like to go in as a value added provider. I always wanted to stand out as value added, that we are so much more than just a hospice. We are so much more. We're your partner, we're your ally, and we want to do this together with you. And so when we showed up as a partner, and I think this was just divine download. I can't really take credit for it. It was just something that, like I said, I couldn't have thought of it myself. I think it was all intended. And so anyway, we just kind of hit the road with it. And what I didn't know was going to happen was that we would be immediately elevated to an authority in the community by establishing ourselves as a CE provider. That in itself was huge for our branding. And that when you educate nurses and it's time to make a referral, and you've been the only one coming in and educating about this service, this benefit, there's no other logical choice. Those are things that I never dreamed would happen. And that's why we grew like we did.
Interesting. And what kind of application did you need to submit to become a CE provider? And what licensing, requirements were in place at the time?
Love that. Yeah, it's relatively easy to establish yourself as a CE provider. The trouble is it's hard to find the information online. So I'm just nerdy enough to dive into projects like that. And so I figured it out. You need a set of policies and procedures. You need a structure for your program, various types of things. It's not an application per se. It's more a set of documents that you submit to a board of nursing. A board of nursing is a way of getting yourself established. There's also national accreditation through ANCC. I'm here in Kansas. I chose Kansas Board of Nursing, applied, got approved as a provider, and went on from there.
How fast or slow is the process of submitting the application to the Board of Nursing and getting approved?
Yeah. With the State Board of Kansas, because they only review at their quarterly board meetings, max time is about six months, depending on when you apply and submit. We have other states that we work with, though, where we can get it done from start to finish in as little as 3 to 4 months. It can be really fast.
Yeah, that's actually much faster than I expected. And
Yeah.
how do they determine how many credits you qualify for or your class qualifies for?
Mm-hmm. It's truly based on the amount of content you have. So if you're teaching a live training and it's a 1-hour class, it's a minute per minute exchange. So State Board of Kansas defines one continuing education contact hour as 50 minutes of content. Florida defines it as 60 minutes of content. So you need to know which state you're working with. And what their guidelines are. But yeah, that's it. So as long as if it's live content, if it's video recorded content, audio even, then it's a minute per minute exchange. The only time we get into trouble is if and it's not trouble, it's just a little more technical. If you want somebody to say read articles or read a book or something like that, then you need to do something called a pilot time test study and have 6 or 8 people read that content. They all get back to you with the amount of time that it took, and you're going to use a formula to average that out and determine the content or the contact hour credit.
I wonder how accurate that actually is. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Whoever designed that requirement probably never took a CE class in their life.
For sure. I stay away from the written stuff in my own CE courses just because I think nurses are really tired of that. And 82% of internet traffic is video viewing. They like video, they like audio. Make it easy.
Yeah. Maybe that's something I should get into in the future because I make all these videos anyway. And I had a recruiter from the hospital that I work in. She's a director in HR who helps recruit nurses into the hospital system. And she asked if I wanted to work in their recruitment department so I can help recruit nurses because I've made videos in the past showing nurses step by step how to apply for the Kaiser system because I work for this hospital called Kaiser Permanente in Northern California. It's like one of the best hospitals, right? So I've also made videos breaking down all of the benefits that our hospital provides for nurses And they
Hmm.
saw that video and they said, wow,
Nice.
like, I wish you could just do this for all of the employees that board into the hospital so that we don't have to go over
Cool.
it in orientation and they already know. But they tried to hire me for that role. And I'm the type of person that I like to create things that I want to create, not because somebody's telling me to create them usually. And
Sure.
it's because I have an interest in them. So all these videos that I make is because I'm like, honestly, I like really love speaking to people like you. I love to hear all of these stories that people don't really hear about, especially when it comes to nurses. Like you may
Yeah.
hear about it in the finance sector, right? You hear
Hmm.
about people going into real estate and investing in real estate, and they may have a background in something that's completely unrelated to nursing. But when you
Hmm.
speak to nurses, you'll realize that nurses are entrepreneurs too. And they have
Exactly.
all of these ideas that people who are not nurses also have. Right?
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just like I'm just so fascinated by all of this. Okay, so now let's get down to how did you arrange or how did you collect payment now for these clients that you were getting? Because that's a process in and of itself that's very complicated for a lot of people.
Yes, yes. And that's where I was really blessed to be. My husband and I worked side by side in the hospice. I managed everything clinical, and he was operations. Okay. So that's like everything else as far as I was concerned. But he did the billing. He had to learn the CMS billing method, and everything was electronically transmitted. We billed back then on a weekly basis for all of our clients, and it was all an electronic transmission that happened over the phone line. I remember back in the day, crazy. But so anyway, but there was a specific platform and server that he had to log into and be able to load all of our clients in there, as well as all of their pertinent billing information and all of those things. ADRs, I'll say, those requests for additional documentation request, they were relatively few back in that day. I know today hospices and every provider, I think, really has a challenge with managing those additional documentation requests after billing. But we pretty much, I mean, we had very few struggles. We billed Medicare, we billed Medicaid, we billed private insurances, we did some charity care, and we did some private pay. Not a whole lot, but we did some of that as well. And but by and large, I guess I'd say 93% of our billing was Medicare. We had a small percentage of Medicaid, and the rest would have been private pay or charity care.
Mhm. I see. So, what portion of that was allocated towards, like let's say operations, staff, and like can you break down the costs involved of your revenue and the, all of the liabilities that were involved in running a business like this? Because I want to know exactly how much you could expect from your business to have like at the end of the year per se.
Like as remaining profit or
Remaining profit. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We were very heavy in personnel. I'll say that because we wanted to do hospice differently. So at the end of every year, there may have been 150, $200,000 remaining in profit. Now we were a 3 mil at our highest point. We were serving 35 to 45 patients per day
Wow.
on hospice consistently. Yeah, we did some heavy marketing, heavy campaigning. And so we grew. I invested $6,000 in that hospice, and we grew it to $3 million in annual revenue, um, using that CE provider program as a vehicle for marketing. But again, think about this: we are very rural, right? So where we are in Kansas, there's 20 people per square mile. Ever been in a Starbucks line? Okay. So we are very, very rural. If you cross the border 15 miles north of us into Nebraska, there are 13 people per square mile. This is the big Midwest, right? Big agriculture out here. So lots of family farms, big places, and not as many people. So mileage was a big, big burden to bear in managing all of these patients, as well, as the number of personnel that were needed to be able to care for them well. So as much as we could, we hired nurses in different, county areas and that kind of thing, but there's just a lot of driving. I think that's still a real burden for just about every hospice that exists. And here's one of the things I'll tell you, as far as being able to break down at this point, what did we have for operations? What did we have for, personnel, payroll, taxes, all those things? That would have been more my husband's game than mine. So I wasn't nearly as involved in that as I am today in my current business. But yeah, so I cannot give you firm numbers.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And totally understandable. I've interviewed nurses before who said, I am good at this. I know the nursing portion of it. And my husband
Mhm.
or my wife will help me with the other part because they're
Yeah,
good at managing that part of the business.
yeah,
So I totally understand. It's the
yeah.
same. It's very similar with me and my wife. Like when it comes to like the money side of it, like I'm so obsessed with numbers and statistics that I'll manage all of that. And she'll help me with the marketing.
Yeah.
That's why at the beginning of this year, we started focusing on like short form content because I was like exclusively mostly on YouTube, long form content. And she
Yep.
said, why don't we just start making more short form videos? And we did. And from early on this year in January, I think we had like maybe 8,000, 9,000 followers on Instagram. And now we have about 23,400,
There you
somewhere
go.
around there. So it's growing much faster than our YouTube channel at this point
Love
because in our
that.
YouTube channel, we have around 59,000 subscribers and we've been running this channel for like 3.5 years, almost four.
Yeah.
Right. But I totally get it. One question I have though is have you ever considered acquiring other hospice agencies?
I would say no. Yeah, that's a great clip to use, isn't it? But no. And here's why. I think today the rules and regulations around hospice, they have changed. I was a hospice owner and provider when the times were still really, really good and the regulation was a lot less. And I think this is what typically happens in healthcare is that we can have a good thing and then we hyper regulate it and we make it so hard for providers to even exist. And so today's landscape for hospice is very, very different than what I was in. For instance, I know that today new hospice providers have to pay $10,000 for the state surveyor to come out for the initial survey. I didn't have that expense back in the day, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So that in addition to, like I say, regulation changes, payment changes. There have been massive changes to how hospice providers get paid for the services they provide. That really has a huge impact on what they're able to do. So for me, that ship has sailed. It was a wonderful, oh my gosh, wonderful experience. I was blessed to speak at a couple of national hospice conferences. I mean, some things that happened during that time were just incredible, and the growth I experienced personally and professionally was truly profound.
Mm. I could imagine if you're working in hospice and you're a nurse, it must be very emotional, right? At times, because
Mhm.
you're providing care to these family members, these patients, when this is the end of the road for them, right? Like
Yeah.
they have no other option.
Hmm.
And I can't even imagine the things you might have seen or the family members who came and saw their patients, their family members,
Hmm. Hmm.
come and go from, this life. It's just
Hmm.
like I've not me myself. I've never worked hospice, but I know somebody who has,
Hmm.
and she used to tell me the stories. And she is a very emotional person, so
Hmm.
she would often come home crying after
Yeah.
leaving her shift because of what she experienced. But she loved it. She loved
Yeah.
every minute of it
Yeah.
because of the care that she provided to these people before they went. Right.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. And I think it puts you in touch with, definitely puts you in touch with your own mortality. My husband and I have had numerous discussions about what we want the end of our own lives to look like, the kind of care that we want to receive. Our discussions about advanced care planning are so candid
mhm,
that, and most people can't even stand to go there. You
mhm,
just want to avoid it. But nobody's getting out of this game alive. And so I think that's one of the biggest gifts, I think, of having worked in hospice and experienced that, is that it really brought all of that to light and really makes it important to live every day, to the fullest, not just your last 6 months. I mean, come on, we got to live it all.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the to this part here where you said that you decided not to go and acquire other agencies
Hmm.
because of all these changes that happened. You started your agency with just $6,000. That may not be the case today. So, what is it that you're doing today that's different? Because you said that you left the home agency business, and
Hmm.
now you're focused on something else. What is that?
Yeah, I we sold our hospice years ago,
Mm.
and I have a work from anywhere business. I say that it fits in my backpack, and so this is really just helping nurse entrepreneurs and healthcare organizations establish themselves as CE providers is something that I do. And I also serve as a business and marketing mentor for nurse entrepreneurs. So I provide an annual mentorship program. It's a 12-month program going through just 8 different domains of entrepreneurship. And then finally, I am the founder of the Nurses Feed Their Young movement, which is all about transforming nursing culture from one where nurses eat their young to one where nurses feed their young.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Now let's talk about that a little bit because I experienced that even till this. You know what's weird? I've interviewed nurses in the past, and one of them in particular. I'm not going to say who it is, but I remember during this interview, this gentleman told me he's a nurse. He told me that he doesn't understand why these new grads just don't get it because we had to deal with this as graduates. Like we learned from, we had to learn on our own. We had to pick up things on our own, and the way he was speaking, it just made me look at him as if, wow, like you were in that position before. You were a new grad.
Yeah.
And the person that you may be training today, they are in the position that you were in before. Even though it might have been different, you at one point just had your degree. You
Yep.
are now working as a brand new nurse and you have to learn the skills. Maybe you didn't have somebody that guided you through that, but you could be this one person that guides this new generation of nurses and they can
Mhm.
learn from you. And even, in my workplace, even whether it's now or where I've worked at in the past, I've seen so many nurses bully each other or bully one another. And I just don't understand it
Mhm.
because before I became a nurse, I didn't see that as much, but I see it so much in the nursing profession.
Mhm.
So, why did you decide to get into this realm of business and nursing,
Mhm.
about nurses eating their young?
Yeah, well, I think like you, I've experienced myself. I experienced it myself for the first time when I was a nursing student. I didn't even get through school and graduated, and so it's a terrible, terrible thing that exists in nursing. Even though nurses are voted year after year the most trusted healthcare professional, right? I think if the general community knew what is the culture of nursing, they would be quite shocked because they trust us, right, with so many things. But I think they can't imagine that this really happens. But the trouble is, now, Jason, is that 33% of new grad nurses, are leaving the profession within their first 2 years. Okay. 33% of new grad. Can you imagine? They're hanging up their degree, they're giving up all the time, money, energy invested in getting that RN credential, and they're leaving the profession to do anything else. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around that. Yet at the same time, healthcare organizations are doing nothing about culture. We talk about valuing nurses, we talk about, appreciating nurses, but we don't clean the house. We don't clean the house. And so even for seasoned nurses, seasoned nurses also get treated, poorly as well. They can experience nurses eat their young. If they're just floated to a unit to help out for the day and they have to ask where are the supplies, begin the eye rolling, the foot stomping, the heavy sighing, right? All of those things. And it's just a question, guys. Just because I don't know where something is doesn't mean I'm not a competent nurse. So it's really old. I did a poll on LinkedIn last year, just a casual poll that said, have you ever left a position because of toxic nursing culture? Almost immediately, about 650 nurses responded.
Wow.
86% said, yes, I have. Another 7% said, I haven't yet, but I would if I could.
Mm.
20 years from now, 15, 20 years from now, when I need a nurse, I want to know that there's going to be somebody around. Today, for the first time in my life, I can imagine our profession just imploding. And I think it's just a shame that we've come to this point. So we've got to resolve it. That's why I'm in it.
I think that's part of the reason why when nurses or nursing students or potential nursing students decide to get into the profession is because they're thinking about the bottom line these days. They're not thinking about the passion of what it means to be a nurse. They're thinking inflation has risen. I need to pay my bills. I just need a job that will pay me enough. Let me get into nursing. And then when they do get into nursing, they don't realize how cutthroat it is,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
how toxic it can be, and then they end up leaving, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of the reason. So now you have a lot of
Agreed.
nurses who get into it who are just in it for the wrong reasons too. And I don't think it's going to help our profession anymore either. So then you have the nurses who have been in it for a long time and are retiring, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
you have the new
Yeah.
nurses who are coming in and are retiring. And then who are
Yeah.
we going to have left, right?
Exactly. Who's going to be there? And there's another statistic out there. Just think about this one. Wrap your brain around it. Is that the average tenure of a long-term care director of nursing right now is about 2 years
Wow.
for an entire facility? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
just wow. That
Yeah.
is. I mean, I'm praying they're all excellent and highly confident and competent, but 2 years, really?
That kind of makes sense to me because I've seen many directors come and go.
Oh yeah.
It's just, I mean, all across the board, if you think about it, there's just so much pressure placed on all of us, whether you're at the bedside or in administration.
Yeah.
And the reason I haven't gone into administration myself is because I know how much pressure that it's placed on them. Like I know
Mm-hmm.
nursing is already hard enough, but to be an administrator and knowing that you value the nurse's opinion, but at the same time, you know that you have someone above you who's telling you what you need to do. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a very difficult balance. If you
Right.
try to side with the nurses, then you are not meeting the quotas. You're not meeting all of these things that are placed upon you by the employer above you,
Right.
right? So that's
Right.
why they end up a lot of them end up leaving the leadership roles that they're in.
You shine a light on some really significant issues, though, and I think now more than ever we really need to rethink just about everything that we've ever done in nursing. All the things that we hear. Well, this is the way we've always done it. Scratch that. If you hear that, it needs to go on a list. We're going to evaluate this thing and
Yeah.
see if it's valuable or not. Because if it's not life giving, if it's not assisting with building up and bolstering the nursing workforce, we need to ditch it and do something else. I mean, we've got to think out of the box right now if nursing is going to really pull through as a profession and be able to continue.
Mhm. Yeah, it's pretty sad. And then in addition to that, we're dealing with other forces that are coming into play. Like there's specific areas of nursing that are being replaced by technology, like advice call centers, where
Mm-hmm.
nurses are usually the ones that are answering the phones and picking up the phone to answer patients' questions to let them know whether they need to see their primary care doctor, go to a visit
Mm-hmm.
and see them to treat their problem, or they need to go to the ER. Now we have AI voices that are answering these phones and just running through an algorithm because that's basically what the nurses were doing anyway, right? So they're
Right.
running through this algorithm, answering the patient's questions and letting them know what they need to do. So small
Mm.
things like this. However, I will say that nursing is one of the professions that is probably the safest when it comes to being replaced by AI, because we
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of manual labor. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things that is just very difficult for either
True.
AI or a robot to replace.
Right.
So okay, so now let's talk about the marketing side of this, right? You said you have a LinkedIn account, right?
I do.
So is that where you promote most of your businesses, your like most of the marketing takes place for you?
I work with three platforms primarily. I use LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Those are my top three. I also do a little bit of work on Instagram and TikTok, just kind of experimenting. Those are younger demographic usually, and they're not usually my people. So I kind of just I try to keep it easy when it comes to marketing. I think we can try to be experts at all the things and really not be that successful doing that. So these three, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube, have really worked well for me.
I see. And you said which one is the one that's at the core, the one that you really focus on the most?
Mm, I can't say
And
that there's any. Go ahead.
no, I mean, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. I'm talking about specifically the business that you're focused on right now, not
Mhm.
the platform.
Hmm. That's tough. It probably would be LinkedIn. Yep.
And
Yeah.
in on LinkedIn, is that where you reach most of your entrepreneurs that are in the nursing field who you want to guide and have them, buy into this program or
Mhm.
maybe a course that you provide to them? Like, can you explain what is it that you're providing to them exactly?
Sure. Now, and I think the difference in the platforms that I use, specifically thinking about Facebook and LinkedIn, LinkedIn is where I do more of my professional networking, right? So I'm looking for collaborative opportunities. I'm looking for business to business opportunities instead of business to consumer. So, that has its own unique thing. On Facebook, I'm more connecting with individual nurse entrepreneurs, that kind of thing. So, I think it's how they're used that is a little different for me. But on LinkedIn, I have come in contact with quite a few people who need my services to establish themselves as a continuing education provider for nurses or to simply add continuing education credit to courses that they have. So that's been a great place for me to connect with professionals and also for the Nurses Feed Their Young movement. Again, people on LinkedIn, they identify themselves by their title. They're proud of what they are, and they you can search, by title. You can really connect with the right demographic. That's one of the things I absolutely love about that platform. So yeah, that's made it very easy to build a nice little network for Nurses Feed Their Young, and also for the other types of business that I do.
And can you explain what the programs provide to your customers?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with, of course, the CE thing. Let's just start that nursing continuing education. We have a done for you nursing continuing education provider application service. So we take all the mystery out of it, and literally our clients can answer, like, they can take 30 minutes, answer a few questions, and my team and I will write their entire CE application for them, submit it to the board, and stay with them until they're approved. So it's kind of like if you would hire an accountant to do your taxes, we do the same thing, but for nursing CE applications. That way, busy people can keep on being busy people, and this is getting done at the same time. We also have a course that people can take, though, if they're looking for a lower financial investment. It's called the CE Provider Application Toolkit. They can get all of our, in a course, access to the tools and templates and things that they need to be able to do it on their own for a lower investment, which works real well for some people. Our mentorship program is called Business and Marketing Made Easy for Nurse Entrepreneurs. And that's a 12-month mentorship where we literally use the nursing process to write your RX for business success. So that's what we're really all about. We work on 8 different domains of entrepreneurship, including things like, well, first of all, sales savvy. Most nurses absolutely hate selling, hate it, right? We're used to giving everything. So we do sales savvy, we do time management and productivity, lead magnets and sales funnels, social media and graphics, optimizing your profile, all of these things that without them, probably you're not going to be as successful as you want to be because you're not visible. The whole program is based on these 3 steps: get visible, attract your audience, grow your authority and your income. That's it. So we do that. And then otherwise, we have the Nurses Feed Their Young member community that just launched. And this is I'm really excited about this little baby. This is the newest little baby we have. And it's a membership for all levels of nurses, whether they are CNA, nursing student, any level of licensure, and up to nurse entrepreneur, where they can all get together under one roof and find support, meaningful continuing education courses, connect with experts in a lot of different fields of nursing, all for $27 a month, and have some self-care resources, yogis, and all kinds of stuff in there. So it's really a fantastic little space. We're really, really proud of it and glad to have launched it. So
Wow, you have a lot on your plate.
I have some great friends and a great team, though, too.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask. How do you manage all of this, and what kind of people did you hire to be part of your team?
Love that. First and foremost, I think I was looking for simplicity in bringing on a team. So I chose this route very purposefully to work with contracting employees or contracting team members because I want them to do what they want to do at a time that they want to do it, number one, and have a lot of flexibility. Plus, there's a whole lot that goes on with employment, from taxes to just the benefit burden, all of those things. And honestly, this business I wanted to structure very differently than our brick and mortar hospice that we had back in the day. I wanted to have more of our income available for us. Is that wrong to say? I don't
Yes,
think that's
no,
wrong
it
to
is
say.
not wrong to say at all. I totally get it.
But yeah, so having contracting employees, or team members, I can pay them a meaningful wage for what they're doing. They can do it whenever they want to, and as long as all I care is I get it by XYZ date. You
Yes.
do it when you want to do it, and as long as I have it, I'm good. So this has worked out really well. We've had some team members now for almost 3 years, and that's about
Oh,
since we got started. But for instance, for our nursing continuing education business, I have course writers on staff. I have someone who does the applications. I have someone else who helps with just our credentialing process when we're taking CE courses from others. Say you've already got it prepared, the course prepared, and you just want us to add CE credit to it through our own program, we can do that. So I have somebody managing that. And I have some support for social media and kind of content repurposing, stuff like that. So works out pretty well.
wow. How did you find all of these employees?
Oh, I found them. I found them online. We ended up networking in different places, and yeah, so they've all been online connections. Other than my husband, nobody's in the same state as me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With us, right now we have our YouTube platform where I have a video editor. It used to take me like 28 to 32 hours to edit my own YouTube videos back in the day.
Oh,
And I said, I need my time back. I need to hire somebody to do this. And some people don't realize that if you're a business owner, you pay money to buy your time back, right? And
exactly.
that's exactly what I started doing when I paid a video editor to start editing our videos. Those are 32 hours that I can now get back to plan more videos, film more videos, reach out to more nurses so that I can interview them and things like that.
Yep.
So in addition to that, I ended up hiring a virtual assistant. We got a thumbnail editor. And now at this point, I have more free time so I can focus on. We created a course for nurses to help them move to Northern California. But during all that time, we also had spreadsheets on our website that we were selling to help nurses find out where the best area would be for them to move to. If they
Nice.
take the cost of living into account and the pay that they're going to receive from the hospitals in these areas.
Hmm.
And over time, I've hired like spreadsheet editors to help us improve those spreadsheets. But now I have computer programmers that are helping us develop an app, right? So
Love it.
it's all of this. You don't even need to know how to do these things, but
Yes.
you just hire the people who know how to do these things and
Hmm.
you can monetize it. You can make so much money doing these things.
Yes. Yes. We truly have to get out of our own way,
Yes.
because I've seen so many times when I'm the bottleneck. I'm the reason work's not getting out, so I
Mhm.
need to clear the slate so that, the team just they can get the work done. I just need to let them shine, get out of the way.
It's funny that you say that because for a good amount of time I said, I'm not going to pay somebody else to build a program for me. I'm just going to learn how to program myself. And I started taking coding classes.
Yeah.
And I mean, I love to code, don't get me wrong, but it would take forever if I tried to do it myself. So I lasted about 3 months learning how to code in Python.
Hmm.
And at least I learned the basics because now when I get these programs from these programmers and I'm like reviewing the script, I can understand some of it. So
Yeah.
it does help me in that area.
Hmm.
But I can't see myself building an entire program where some of these people have been doing it for decades and you can just pay them to do something that would take you probably a couple of months to do yourself as a new programmer. They can do
Exactly.
it in less than a few hours.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. I love that.
Okay, so now, oh, I forgot to ask because you said that you help businesses and providers and healthcare workers develop their own CU, continuing education programs, or add to their programs, or get credentialed and get approved by the licensing boards. Are you able to do this in every state in the US for a nurse? Let's say, because you said you're in, is it Arkansas, Nebraska? Oh,
Kansas.
Kansas,
Kansas.
Kansas,
Yep.
right? Are you able to do it for nurses that live out of state?
There are about 13 boards of nursing that have an application process for nursing continuing education. So, yes, we can work with any of those states. The flip side is, and what I want to tell you is ANCC, right? That has always been like the gold standard because everything, they're the national accreditation organization. The trouble with that is that it's very, very time consuming and cumbersome process. It takes a minimum of 2 years to get through that application. And usually when people come to me, they've already been searching, trying to figure this out. How do I do this? And they're ready. They're ready to go. So I can offer an alternative that's going to get the process done from within 3 to 4 months, 6 months, something like that, instead of 2 years. So, but the thing is that everybody needs to understand is that state board approved nursing continuing education credit is accepted by 46 out of 50 state boards of nursing for purposes of licensure renewal. So almost as good as the ANCC, right? I'm all about easier, faster, better. How can we get you to the finish line? Plus, there are some other things that are very different. The ANCC has a standard about who would be an ineligible company, right? So think medical device companies, prescription drug companies, they would be ineligible. I even have a dear friend who's invented a new hospice bedsheet system designed to prevent pressure sores. Because she sells a product that would be used in daily patient care, she would be ineligible.
Wow.
So at the state board level, it's a wide open playing
Mhm.
field. And in my opinion, just my opinion, but I think nurses need to know about new medical devices. I think we need to know about new medications, their mechanism of action, how to use them, how not to use them. It doesn't make
Yeah.
sense to me. So just kind of doesn't compute. I can see how it might be might be misused, but golly,
No,
yeah,
yeah, that's you're right. I never really thought about that because all of the classes that I've taken, none of them have to do with any specific medication that's out on the market that has been FDA approved. We
Mhm.
don't know about all of that. We have to do our own research. We have to go through the studies,
Right,
but there's no
right.
education for nurses on things like that.
Right, right, and it's painful,
Wow.
and there's even a thing that, I worked with another company on, they have this it almost looks like a water gun or something like that, but you pull a trigger on it, but it's designed to rapidly infuse blood products, and
Oh,
I'd never seen such a
wow.
thing. Right. So I connect with some really cool people who are saying, we've been trying to do this, get this approved so we can teach nurses, and they're just not able to do it for any number of reasons. So
Man,
again, we can hyper regulate anything.
man. I know. That is so true. Man, regulations these days, you're right. They're
Yes.
getting out of hand.
Yes.
And
When
that's
it
why
doesn't make
also
sense.
unrelated to nursing, but that's why real estate is so expensive these days because there's so many regulations, especially because I'm in California.
Yeah.
There's a hospital, there's like an area of land that our hospital system wants to develop a new hospital in
Hmm.
Sacramento, California. And this area is owned by so many entities that it's taken forever for our hospital system to get rights to build on this land.
Man.
That's why health, about real estate is so expensive in California. Part of the
And
reason.
think of all the dollars spent,
Yeah.
everything in that waiting game, how many petitions had to be filed and all the legal work that had to be done just to get that far.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I started working there in 2018, and I remember when I started working there, they said in 7 years we're going to have a brand new hospital. And this was in 2018, mind you. Okay, so by next
Oh,
year we should have this new hospital. They haven't even started building it.
man.
So, oh gosh.
Oh,
Yeah, so that's
crazy.
what it's like. All right, we're gonna come to an end here. I want to know for people who are interested in reaching out to you, how can they reach out to you? Can you give me your handles, like your username that they can reach out to?
Sure, absolutely. So on LinkedIn, I am the Teresa Sanderson. On YouTube, you'll find me at Teresa Sanderson TV. And on Facebook, I think I'm just sanderson.teresa. You can connect with me, or you can also find me on the Nurses Feed Their Young business pages on either Facebook or LinkedIn.
If you enjoyed this video, then watch this video here where I speak with Chris, the nurse who built a $3 million net worth.